Welcome to this special episode of Humans in 5.
As our regular viewers will know, we both have pretty strong connections to the Great White North, Canada. I was born and raised there.
And I spent the better part of a decade living there. I even married one to boot.
This year, Canada is putting on all the bells and whistles. It's the 150th anniversary of Canada's Confederation, or independence from the United Kingdom. The government are making a very big deal out of this. As a young country, Canada can be a little self-conscious about its age.
The whole year is being filled with a ton of events and activities, including free access to all national parks and many different commemorative events. All of the celebrations are centering around Canada Day, which occurs on July 1st.
Canada Day is the day when the Constitution Act was signed, which represents the moment when Upper Canada, Lower Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick were united into the Dominion of Canada. Over the next few decades, the remaining provinces and territories joined the Dominion as well.
Many other colonial countries have similar commemorative holidays that mark when their country came into its own. For example, Americans have the 4th of July and Australians have Australia Day.
While these types of holidays occur in many former European colonies, they can be hugely uncomfortable for a lot of people. Colonial commemorations in history are largely shaped by colonists and those who hold power, and tend to overlook the struggles faced by both the original occupants of these lands and others who tried to come and build better lives after these new countries were formed.
For example, in Canada, First Nations and Inuit populations that have occupied Canada for over thousands of years before any Europeans set foot on the land we now call Canada. To quote Smith and Raff from our recent AAPA conference, the New World isn't that new, and a lot of people are angry about that. For many Indigenous groups, commemorative holidays like Canada Day can be really negative.
While later arrivals may celebrate their sense of nationalism on Canada Day, such days may remind Indigenous groups of the rights, lands, and history they lost as they were persecuted during the formation of Canada. Dark moments in our history, like the residential school system that took Indigenous children from their families and lands, and the deaths of entire groups due to disease and warfare, are often left out of discussions on how we should remember the building of Canada.
This tendency isn't isolated to Canada. Amongst Australians, some groups remember Australia Day instead as Invasion Day, representing the invasion event that displaced Aboriginal groups from their lands and also led to a lot of suffering for generations. Many colonial celebrations act as though there was no one there previously, when from the perspectives of Indigenous groups, the idea of an invasion on land, culture, and lifeways seems pretty accurate.
Even when we remember Indigenous groups, people often forget about events that followed Confederation. An overlooked fact about Canadian history is that the Canadian government treated people of different races quite poorly in Canada's younger years. Slavery existed before Confederation, and while it was abolished, the treatment of Black Canadians relative to other groups is still debated today.
Canada today brags loudly and proudly about their immigration policies. However, Canada treated non-European immigrants pretty poorly in the early days. For example, a head tax was placed on Chinese immigrants from 1885 to 1923 to deter Chinese people from entering Canada. In 1914, the Komagata Maru, a ship of Indian immigrants who were British subjects and able to travel in the Empire, was turned away from Vancouver, and these members of British Empire were not allowed to make port.
All of these events serve as a reminder that Canada's been through a lot over the past 150 years. There may be many victories we're celebrating as we share our standing in the world, but it's worth taking a step back to remember that we haven't always taken the high ground along the way.
We tend to look at other countries and point out their flaws, but if we're going to remember our history this year, let's remember the whole picture.
Thanks for sticking with us for this Canadian episode, and we'll see you critical thinkers next time on Humans in 5.
Don't forget to subscribe!